A tariff is a tax on imported goods, used for centuries to protect local industries and generate government revenue. By raising the price of foreign products, tariffs encourage consumers to buy American, supporting domestic jobs. The U.S. Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the power to set tariffs and regulate foreign commerce. In early 2025, President Trump returned to office and announced sweeping new tariffs, invoking national emergency powers. He cited the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, i.e. EPA, claiming the flow of fentanyl and large trade deficits posed an extraordinary threat to the U.S. Trump's plan rolled out in two waves: media group, policy announcement at press conference, White House press briefing room, news anchors discussing tariff plan stock distributing equally. First, trafficking tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China for alleged drug export failures. Then, a baseline 10% reciprocal tariff on nearly all imports, with some countries facing rates up to 50%. The administration argued that IEEPA gave the president broad authority to regulate imports during emergencies. Trump's legal team claimed these tariffs were not just taxes, but vital tools of foreign policy and national security. Critics saw this as a dramatic expansion of executive power, bypassing Congress's constitutional role. The move set off alarm bells in Washington and among U.S. trading partners. The legal justification rested on the idea that regulating imports could include imposing tariffs as economic pressure. Trump's lawyers insisted the president needed this flexibility to protect the nation's interests. The stage was set for a major constitutional showdown over who controls America's trade policy. The tariffs sparked immediate backlash from businesses and state governments fearing economic harm. Companies like Vos Selections and Learning Resources warned the new taxes threatened their survival. States argued the tariffs would raise costs for public projects and strain budgets. Prominent attorneys Neil Katyal and Michael McConnell led lawsuits, claiming only Congress can impose taxes. They argued IEEPA was never meant to let the president unilaterally levy tariffs. Lower courts sided with the challengers, but the administration appealed to the Supreme Court. Billions in commerce and the separation of powers were at stake. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, focusing on whether the president could impose tariffs by executive order in a national emergency. The outcome would define the limits of presidential power for years to come. The first legal test came before the U.S. Court of International Trade, which unanimously ruled Trump had overstepped his authority. The court found IEEPA did not clearly authorize the president to impose sweeping tariffs. The administration appealed, but the Federal Circuit upheld the decision, emphasizing Congress's exclusive power to tax and regulate commerce. A D.C. District Court judge echoed this, stating, "The power to regulate is not the power to tax." These rulings created a strong legal barrier against the tariffs. The judiciary made clear the president cannot impose massive taxes without Congress. By the time the case reached the Supreme Court, lower courts had already drawn a firm line. The legal consensus was that Trump's actions infringed on Congress's core powers. The stage was set for the Supreme Court to decide the ultimate question. Would the president's emergency powers override Congress's authority on tariffs? The heart of the case was a clash over the Constitution's separation of powers. Trump's lawyers argued IEEPA let the president act decisively in emergencies, using tariffs as leverage. They cited the 1981 Dames and Moore versus Reagan case, where the court upheld presidential asset freezes during a crisis. The administration claimed similar authority to impose tariffs for national security. The challengers countered that Article 1 gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax and regulate foreign commerce. They argued tariffs are taxes, and only Congress can impose them. The Dames and Moore precedent, they said, was narrow and didn't justify a broad tariff regime. IEEPA had never been used for general tariffs in its nearly 50-year history. The case became a classic test: emergency presidential power versus Congress's explicit authority. The Supreme Court would decide where the line was drawn. Central to the case was the major questions doctrine. This principle says the president needs clear, explicit congressional approval for actions of vast economic and political significance. Challengers argued that imposing nationwide tariffs was exactly the kind of major decision requiring direct authorization. The Supreme Court had recently used this doctrine to strike down sweeping executive actions on climate and student loans. The administration insisted IEEPA's language was enough, especially in foreign policy. But the court disagreed, ruling that a nationwide tariff system was too transformative to be justified by vague statutory language. The majority opinion invoked the major questions doctrine, saying not wire at fire at major bites at fire popwang. Congress had not clearly delegated this power. The decision set a new standard for executive authority in economic policy. The president could not act alone on such a major issue without Congress's explicit consent. While courts debated, businesses and states braced for economic fallout. Importers warned tariffs would force massive price hikes, layoffs, and closures. States said higher costs for public goods would strain budgets and threaten services. Economists challenged Trump's claim that trade deficits were an emergency, noting they're a normal part of global trade. The Supreme Court's ruling to block the tariffs brought immediate relief. It prevented price spikes, supply chain chaos, and likely retaliation from other countries. Industries from agriculture to retail celebrated the decision. The case showed how Supreme Court decisions can have real, immediate effects on Americans' lives. The verdict protected businesses, consumers, and state budgets from a major economic shock. The legal fight underscored the importance of checks and balances in economic policy. The Supreme Court's decision against Trump's tariffs set a historic precedent. The majority affirmed that only Congress can impose taxes and regulate foreign commerce. The ruling was a victory for the major questions doctrine and a check on executive overreach. It signaled that transformative economic policies require clear congressional approval. The decision reasserted Congress's constitutional authority and challenged lawmakers to reclaim their policy-making role. Future presidents, regardless of party, will face stricter limits on using emergency powers for major economic actions. The ruling may shift the balance of power back toward Congress after decades of executive expansion. The legal legacy is clear. The power to tax remains with the people's representatives. The president cannot bypass Congress on issues of such national significance. The Supreme Court's verdict marks a turning point in the ongoing struggle over separation of powers.